So today is not going to be as focused on programming as it is on what the impacts of what we do as programmers are on the world around us. So I don't know if you have noticed, but there are computers absolutely everywhere. This room is full of them. I'm sure your own rooms at home are full of them. Your pockets are probably full of them. We're living in this time of huge, huge technological growth. Everything in the world around us is growing increasingly technological, and more things are being connected to the internet. Software and hardware engineers, people who design computers, have increasingly large impacts on our everyday lives. I have on in there twice. Whoops. With the tools and applications that they are creating for use. So these hardware and software solutions are everywhere, including very critical components of our lives. Hardware and software control the cars that we drive. They control our financial systems. They control how electricity is distributed. They control pretty much everything about how we communicate with each other. Almost every facet of our lives is influenced in some way by a computing system. So a large part of understanding the impact of these tools and applications is understanding system reliability, which is when things are all working as they're intended to do. Now, as your system gets larger, as your program or hardware accepts more inputs, more parameters, more outputs, it is increasingly difficult to ensure that your system is going to be reliable. So we need to make sure that our programs and our hardware are going to work as they scale up. So we also need to be aware of the legal, ethical, and social implications of these things that we build. So there are all sorts of impacts that computers and the internet have had on humans and society and economy and culture at large, both positive and negative impacts. So while many programs are designed with a specific purpose in mind, they might have unintended consequences that the programmer building them might not have anticipated when they were designing them. So one thing that has been made hugely different as opposed to the past is access to information. The internet has enabled people from all over the world to gain access to so much more information than they ever have before. So anyone who wants to find anything, as long as they have an internet connection, they can probably find it somewhere on the internet. So information is free and available to anyone. And this is a huge paradigm shift from the rest of history, where information has only been available to the people who have the funds or the power to gain access to that information, who can have the education, who are able to read all these different things. So now, in this time of the internet, education and the accessibility of it, okay, well, the lights are just off. The accessibility of education is so much higher than it ever has been. Now, while it's super good that okay, thank you for turning the lights back on. While it's super awesome that this information is freely available, it's a big question as to whether all information should be easily accessible. There are websites like WikiLeaks, which keep large companies and governments accountable, and they promote transparency of information transfer, but they also have the potential to endanger people by revealing classified government secrets or potential military plans. So should information like that be made available on the internet? Big questions. Another huge impact that computers and the internet have had is e-commerce. Computer systems have enabled online shopping, which lets us buy directly from retailers. We don't have to get up out of our homes to acquire new things anymore. We can just order them online. And we can even purchase from people who make things who don't have the funds to run a physical store. And a huge example of this is Etsy. People who make very specific things can sell to anyone all over the world because there's this online storefront where they can put things to sell, where their thing that they're marketing might be a very niche application, and people in their area might not all want it. Another impact here is that we're able to find the best product at the lowest price because we can do research across a variety of different marketplaces. We're not disadvantaged by where we live or how much knowledge we have. We can view ratings, we can view reviews across all retailers to see if this is the exact product we want. Now, this does also bring the challenge for small businesses where they have to compete with these low prices being offered by online companies. So they are starting to, or they could have the opportunity to be sent out of business because of the competition with online retailers. Another huge form of e-commerce is crowdfunding. Websites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo allow people to contribute a relatively small amount of money to fund innovative ideas, games, and I didn't finish that sentence. Wow. Innovative ideas, games, or other projects that they think are worthy of their funds. And e-commerce has also opened the door to cyber attacks where hackers are able to steal personally identifying information like credit card numbers or just your email and password for a variety of different things. We're not going to learn how to do that in this class. That is not an ethical use of the tools that we have been given. And this whole lesson is about using the tools we have been given in an ethical way. So we're not going to be learning how to steal people's information because that's illegal.
But ethics is subjective. So
but the law is not. So
that's fair.
But to be fair, Facebook does it all the time. They just take your information, they sell it on the black market.
Facebook does take your information and sell it, but that's because you're giving it to them. They're selling what you have provided to them. They're not stealing your information. So
they're consensually stealing from us.
They're consensually stealing your thing, yes.
Sweet.
As opposed to a hacker who might take it without you knowing, which is not what you want.
But then if a hacker takes it off of Facebook, is that illegal still? Because technically Facebook isn't going to give them the data.
Anything that you put on Facebook, I think, is publicly accessible knowledge. So if a hacker is taking information off of Facebook, I don't know what they could get that isn't already public. Besides maybe your username and password. So maybe be secure with your passwords and don't use the same one for every single website.
Oh, really?
I use my VCHS for everything.
That sounds like a terrible decision. All right, moving on from hackers stealing your information. A hugely growing field right now is artificial intelligence. And this is a developing field that holds unique positive and negative impacts on the world at large. So AI is capable of enhancing a lot of automated processes, making it way easier for us to set reminders, create calendar events, play music, and even purchase items online. We can tell our Alexa or Google Home, hey, remind me to do my homework at 8 p.m. And that machine in our home will tell us to do our homework at 8 p.m. AI is also possible, it also reduces human safety risks. We can send drones and sensors and robots to look at damaged buildings or landscapes, which might be a hazardous location for humans to be. And researchers are figuring out all kinds of ways to use these tools in a variety of different disaster relief situations. And this makes disaster relief way safer for people who are dedicating their lives to making the world safer for other people. We want to ensure that we're using our technology in a way that's safe for everyone. However, AI and machine learning can introduce some very complex ethical questions. For instance, self-driving cars. They allow us to be safer on the road because a self-driving car can't be distracted while it's driving because its only job is to drive. However, what if the car is about to have a collision and it cannot avoid this collision? And there's a few different things in its field of view. What gets prioritized? What if there's a school bus and an elderly couple? How does the AI choose what to collide with? And who decides how this AI makes that decision? Is it the developer who built it? Is it the government? Who makes these decisions? So there's lots of questions that go into these kinds of topics.
But if everybody has, if everybody has a self-driving car, then wouldn't that make it such that nobody could crash?
If everyone has a self-driving car, cars are less likely to collide with one another, but there are still other hazards that could arise as a result of pedestrians or animals or any number of different things. So it's not an infallible system. But good question. Another thing that AI leads to, I mentioned earlier, smart home technology. It has opened up this gateway into a world where our voices are being monitored constantly, even in our own homes. So this could save us, it saves us a lot of time. It can let us do reminders, it sets alarms, all these kinds of things. But to what extent are these technologies saving and surveilling our private conversations? What are they doing with all this information that they're collecting? Are they selling it to people? Are they deleting it as soon as they get it? What are all the implications of these in-home microphones that we have constantly running? Are we fully reading the privacy agreements before we sign them? I know I usually scroll through them without reading it all. So I think that's the norm because they're huge and full of legalese talk that's really boring to read. No one wants to read the whole entire thing. So we might skim past some very important things that we are giving up in our privacy. And another really big question is, how does the bias of programmers affect the decisions made by the artificial intelligences that they create? Bias, for those of us who don't remember the definition, is prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way that is unfair. So how can the bias of programmers affect AI decisions? This is called algorithmic bias, and it has been found to be a problem in a variety of different places. First, in facial recognition software. In a research in 2018, some researchers at MIT found that women and people with darker skin tones are 35% more likely to experience errors with facial recognition technology. And the reason for this is because the software was trained, it learned how to do facial recognition using a set of data that was fed to them by the programmers. And a lot of these data sets were mainly consisting of images of men with lighter skin. So these systems weren't trained in how to recognize the faces of women or the faces of people with a different skin tone than the majority of the data set that they were fed. So we have to be conscious of the bias of building our data sets when we're teaching these artificial intelligences how to recognize things. And this has led to the banning of these technologies by police in some cities because the software might not be reliable at accurately identifying people. It could misidentify or it could just fail to identify someone and lead to an incorrect conviction. So Detroit and Oakland have both banned the use of these technologies within their police forces. And I'm sure many other cities on top of those. And algorithmic bias can also exist within search filters. If we look at this image on LinkedIn, someone might have been searching for Stephanie Williams, and the The prompt was, hey, did you mean to search for Stephen Williams? So in 2016, the networking site LinkedIn was found to have been recommending male variations of women's names in response to search queries. And it did not do the inverse. If you typed in Bridget, it might say, hey, were you looking for Brian? But if you looked for Brian, it wouldn't say, hey, were you looking for Bridget? So once again, there is this bias towards a specific group. And the company said that this was a result of an analysis of users' interactions within the site. However, that's not really a great excuse because it's obviously somewhat discriminatory against all of the women on this website, which, once again, we want to avoid discrimination against anyone. So, as we have seen, while technology can have very positive effects on society, we need to be careful in how we implement it to make sure that unintended consequences are not super negative. They could, because our unintended consequences can also have real impacts on society, on law, on ethics. Legal issues and intellectual property concerns also arise when creating programs. As programmers, as people who are building these programs, we have a responsibility to make sure that our programs are socially, legally, and ethically acceptable. So there is an association called the Association for Computing Machinery, shortens to ACM. They have a professional code of ethics for programmers to abide by. I actually was in the local chapter of ACM when I was in college. I believe I'm still a member, and I ascribe to this code of ethics. So according to ACM, computing professionals should contribute to society and to human well-being, acknowledging that all people are stakeholders in computing. Computing professionals should avoid harm. They should be honest and trustworthy. They should be fair and take action not to discriminate. They should respect the work required to produce new ideas, inventions, creative works, and computing artifacts. Computing professionals should respect privacy, and they should honor confidentiality. So, as we are building our programs, we should keep all of these ideas in mind so that we're not building something that could be potentially detrimental. I saw that there was a chat, but I cannot open chat for some reason right now. So, there it is. Is that not what the NSA is breaking? I don't know. The NSA might not be computing professionals. So
apparently the NSA is using like the tiniest chips in your phone and stuff to record what you're doing at all times.
All right. Yeah, that sounds pretty unethical, honestly. So clearly they would not be ascribing to this code of ethics. So as we live and progress our society in this digital world, it is important to think about how you are able to make a difference and contribute with your own life, with your own creations. You may not choose to go into computer science as your career, but it is more than likely that your career will involve technology in some way, especially as our world grows increasingly digital. So you're almost certainly also going to make an impact on others' lives in your field. Just about anything you do is going to have an impact on the lives of others. So as you go out into the world, be sure to make your mark and make sure that it is a positive one. And there we go.